Welcome. If you haven't noticed, Jamaica has been rocked by two noticeable earthquakes. As you should know, Jamaica is located in a geologically active area and is therefore subject to earthquakes. Jamaica lies on the Caribbean plate, and for those who don't know, the Caribbean plate is just one of several plates that moves across the Earth's crust due to heat from the Earth's mantle. So when these crusts move, they can create earthquakes. And along with that, Jamaica, along with several areas of the world, has cracks within their section of the crust. And these cracks, when they move, or when there are displacements in them, can cause earthquakes. So this makes Jamaica very vulnerable to earthquakes. The erratic nature of earthquakes means that they can strike without warning, and they can range in intensity from slight tremors to great shocks that may last for a few seconds and as long as 5 minutes. And the strange thing about earthquakes, shocks could even come in a series of over several days. So today we're going to just look at a brief history of earthquakes and Jamaica. As you would well know, the Port Royal earthquake of 1692 was Jamaica's most devastating earthquakes. Sources of early Jamaican history document that the earthquake of 1692 as being a great calamity that caused great devastation. Even though the effects of the earthquake were felt over the whole island, the town of Port Royal was worst affected. June 7, 1692 began as an ordinary day. In a letter written to Sir Hans Sloane on June 20, 1692, it was noted that the skies were clear and that the weather was excessively hot, calm and dry. At about midday, what was described as a mysterious roar in the distant mountains was heard, followed by a shaking. The first tremor was gentle, followed by a more violent one. Historian George Bridges stated that this was instantly followed by a shock accompanied by screams of anguish, cries of horror and rushing water and the crash of edifices. With the third rumbling noise, the town of Port Royal, which was once considered the most wealthiest place on earth, and some of the most wickedest things happened there, began shaking violently, and within minutes, a great portion of Port Royal had sunken into the earth. Approximately 1,500 to 2,000 of its inhabitants were killed, an additional 3,000 were injured. In the aftermath of the earthquake, thousands more died from disease and injury. The wharf, which was filled with spoils, sunk immediately, causing a huge tidal wave that destroyed ships that were in the harbour, even throwing one ship in the middle of the island. And the most famous event from Port Royal was seen where Louis Galdi was reportedly walking, and then water had overtaken the streets that moments before displayed glittering treasures of Mexican Peru. So he was most famous for being swallowed by the earthquakes, but sadly that wasn't true. So he basically got, should I say, trapped in a moment where the soil was behaving in a liquid-like manner. So a person could have seen him move downwards, or a person would see that he was swallowed, but unfortunately he wasn't. So he was buried in Port Royal, and you can still see his grave up to this very blessed day. So in other parts of the island, brick and stone buildings had either been leveled or greatly damaged. Many monuments had been shattered or so badly damaged that they were irreparable. The town of St. Diego de la Vega, or Spanish Town, also suffered severe damages, and following the earthquake, there was much looting, robbery and violence. So it's not only now where people loot and rob, they were doing that even in those days. Alright, even the dead were robbed of whatever valuables they had on them. Bridges noted that one of the consequences of this great earthquake was the loss of official papers and documents of the island, thereby rendering our history incomplete. Also, as a result of the earthquake and destruction, as well as the fear of reoccurrence, the council of the island decided to abandon Port Royal site, and land was purchased from Sir William Beeston for the establishment of a new town further up the harbour on the site of what is now the city of Kingston. But the thing is, Kingston, if you look at the geological map of Jamaica, doesn't offer the best site as it relates to the makeup, the geological makeup, because the rocks there aren't as solid as other parts of the island. So Kingston is in a danger zone as it relates to earthquakes. Alright, so we are now at one of the most memorable, and this is the Kingston earthquake of 1907. The earthquake of January 14, 1907 was by far the worst calamity to befall the city of Kingston. The massive earthquake measured an estimated 9.5 on the Richter scale. Reports state that near the end of 1906, the weather was unseasonably chilly. But before the week of 1907, the temperature had risen to a comfortable degree. On the day of the earthquake, Kingston was filled with visitors from Canada, England and the United States, as well as delegates from the West Indian Islands who were attending an agricultural conference at the Jamaica College. The circus was also in town. At approximately 3:30 in the afternoon, After the first speaker had concluded his address, a severe 30-second tremor was felt. During the quake, bricks were seen everywhere as walls fell, and almost immediately after the earthquake, a fire broke out in Kingston. The fire destroyed 56 acres of commercial property in Kingston. It engulfed South Parade on the north, Mark Lane on the east, and Orange Street on the west. Nearly every building on Harbour Street, Port Royal Street, and Water Lane had been demolished. Newspapers such as the Jamaica Daily Telegraph and the Anglo-American Herald reported that stones collapsed, covering hundreds of persons of all classes of the community. The Gleaner Company's offices were demolished, and they could only resume printing on January 18, 1907, at the Government Printing Office. In the Gleaner's January 18 publication, it was reported that hundreds were killed instantly. Omnibuses and streetcars were overturned. A number of churches, banks, and other business places were severely damaged. Few habitable houses remained in Kingston and Lower St. Andrew, and many were forced to camp in Kingston Racecourse, which is now National Heroes Park, and other open spaces. After the initial tremor, another severe quake was felt at about 7:30 p.m., and as the fire worsened and more persons were injured, the public hospital became overcrowded. On the first night, 27 legs were amputated, and individuals with extensive injuries were brought in for treatment. Patients eventually had to be laid on the grassy area adjoining the hospital. By the morning, following the earthquake, the fire had still not been entirely extinguished, and the periodic shocks could still be felt. Most of the unclaimed bodies found were buried in a ditch in the Maypen Cemetery. In the days following, other unidentified bodies were cremated in a large pit. As with the earthquake of 1692, looting, of course, took place all over the town, and as a result, Governor Sweetham posted armed guards on the streets. On the 17th of January, the United States warship Missouri and Indiana landed sailors who took some injured aboard and provided much needed help in recovering those injured and trapped in collapsed buildings, and helping with the clearing of debris. A relief fund chaired by Archbishop Enos Nuttall was organized shortly after the earthquake, and the committee saw to the clothing and feeding of the displaced citizens. Overall, it is reported that 800 to 1,000 souls perished and thousands more have been injured. There were also many who have never been found. Property damage was extensive and estimated at £2 million, but fortunately, many were able to recover from their financial losses from insurance companies. Alright, and this earthquake is the most recent earthquake that most would remember and would experience vivid memory, especially amongst our grand folks. And this was the earthquake of March 1st, 1957. The earthquake of March 1st, 1957 was the heaviest felt earthquake since 1907. The earthquake unit noted that the majority of the damages were sustained to the western parishes and the corporate area. Though not nearly as devastating as the 1907 earthquake, the effects were still significant. Some of these effects were the disruption of electric services, transportation, and communication. The Jamaica Public Service reported damage to the communication systems affecting the areas of Stony Hill, Newcastle, Mountain View, Crossroads, and downtown Kingston. Telephone lines to the Ocherius area and along the coast to Montego Bay went dead immediately after the shocks and were not in service again till some 3 hours later. Train services from Kingston to Montego Bay were affected as stones and debris blocked the traffic and caused a break in the track between Ipswich and Stonehenge. 2 of the main roads leading out of the town, Anchovy Road and the road to Hanover, were blocked by debris falling off hillsides. There were also injury and loss of lives. 3 casualties were reported: the death of a vendor who was struck on the head by falling bricks from the wall of an old kitchen at 63 Charles Street in Kingston, a woman crushed by rolling stones while walking on the road, and a railway employee who was instantly killed by falling stones. There were also damages to buildings as expected. For example, the steeple of the St. James Parish Church had fallen off, causing damage to the roof. The clock tower in St. James was completely destroyed, and several buildings were badly cracked but did not collapse. Springmount Police Station in St. James was badly damaged, and the building had to be vacated. In January 13, 1993, the earthquake unit continues to do their good duty. Yes, recorded a 5.4 magnitude earthquake. It was the most significant earthquake since 1957, and as a result, Jamaica also experienced a little damage. The damage included damages to houses, buildings, and infrastructure. Approximately 518 families suffered loss of houses and properties. Of the 518 displaced citizens, 450 were from Kingston and St. Andrew. Water infrastructure was affected as the Rio Kobe pipeline in Caymanas Estate was damaged because of liquefaction, a phenomenon in which the strength and the stiffness of soil is reduced by earthquake shaking or other rapid loading. Liquefaction-related cracks were observed on the Hunts Bay Causeway Bridge, and there were also damage to the National Water Commission water treatment plant building, water mains and pipelines in several areas. Significant damage was also reported to the buildings of various educational institutions, and financial losses were estimated at 15 million at the time, a little bit over 15 million. Landslides were also reported, and landslides occurred along the Yallas water pipeline route between Hope River and Augustown, Resthaven and Bull Bay, and Cambridge and 11 miles. A landslide occurred in the limestone quarry located south of Mona Reservoir. A number of roads were blocked or damaged as a result of the landslides, and the government of Jamaica budgeted some $2 million for the clearance of roads. So, while we are experiencing these earthquakes, we should keep in mind that Jamaica is quite vulnerable, not only to hurricanes, which we prepare mostly for, but for earthquakes, which can happen at any given time without warning, and they can cause severe damage. So let us be mindful of this as we observe not only the election and not only these tremors, but let us observe a sense of readiness throughout the year, as an earthquake has a history in Jamaica and can reoccur at any time. As many geologists have said that we are long overdue for a major quake. So join us next time and be safe.